Two young men, two handsome young men.
Thank you.
Ryan Wang and what's your name?
Alex.
Alex
Alex Dantas here.
Danas. Great. They're going to talk about navigating the global ecosystem for physical AI. By the way, when it comes to AI solution stack, think of it in terms of infrastructure layer. It's all it talks about like data chips, data center, grid energy, and all that. And then up there, one layer up is like edge AI, and physical AI is part of that. And then one layer up is applied AI. So take it away, guys.
I think edge AI is part of physical AI, but we can debate about that.
Yeah, I also think the physical AI is the old IoT.
Yeah. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ryan Wang, and here with me is a dear friend and my partner in a lot of ways, Alex. So today, I think when I look into the programming for my session at SVEF today, I was like, oh, this is actually the second most challenging session for the program, because the most challenging time is always the 11:30 one, because that's a session sitting between people and lunch. And the second most challenging is
After lunch.
1 p.m., which is after lunch. So I think my only goal for this session is hopefully by the end, we can wake you guys up instead of having you guys fall asleep. So we are trying to make this conversational, entertaining, and interactive. And with that, let's go to the topics for today, which is navigating the global ecosystem for physical AI. This is one of my favorite topics. Is for me, I have been a venture capital investor for the past 11 years, and currently I manage a VC fund called Solaris Venture Partners, where we primarily make investments in AI infrastructure, physical AI, and also robotics sector. And also for me, I've been traveling all around the world, looking into different ecosystem, connecting with different ecosystem, try to learn, what's happening in Silicon Valley, and more importantly, what's happening outside Silicon Valley, and how different ecosystem are connected from the entire world back to the Silicon Valley as well, right? So I think nowadays we live in a very fragmented world, right? Geopolitical, regional conflicts, wars, right? So the world is more fragmented than ever. But in the physical AI space, we know the industry relies on a supply chain that is by nature global, right? So my friend Alex, he has also traveled around the world, and he has been talking to many different ecosystems. So I think this will be a very interesting conversation to provide like two-sided perspective on this particular topic. So with that, Alex, maybe you can give the audience a quick intro on your side.
Sure. Thank you for having me here. I am the CEO of a company called Circuit Launch. About 9 years ago, we started a co-working space with the intention of bringing the mechatronic engineers inside of the same roof. We started in Oakland, and little by little, companies start coming in, and then we start merging that with sometimes people call that as a makerspace, and we got into a model though called co-factoring. Co-factoring is a shared manufacturing space where people are going to build your prototype and your first few hundred pieces. We have two campuses today. We have one in Oakland, another one in Mountain View, right across from NASA. We together have about 120 companies resident into the ecosystem right now. I've seen many companies now start with the one desk and grow to over 100 people. And collectively, companies that have raised almost $500 million while a resident of Circuit Launch.
Including Boston Dynamic?
Boston Dynamic was not a member of Circuit Launch.
Oh, okay.
We got the building from them.
Right.
So our campus is in Mountain View. We got it from Boston Dynamics, which is where it's the West Coast building.
Awesome. So I like to go straight to the meat of the discussion, right? We all know a quick question here. How many of you love robots? Okay, great.
She does it.
I love robots, and most of you love robots. That's good. And if you look into anything related to robot industry, you know that there are two dominating force and two dominating region in the world that's really driving the leadership of this new technology and this new industry, which is US and China, right? So, Alex, on your perspective, how do you compare these two ecosystems? What's going to happen between US and China? What's your take and thesis in this space overall?
That would require a lot more than a few minutes of
I know.
an answer. But so on the manufacturing space, China still leads by far. However, there's a whole movement of large companies leaving China right now. We're there like a few weeks ago, and I was talking to the Foxconn Venture Fund, who had a good 3 hours conversation, and that's the main team. Large companies are leaving China. However, there is not yet a ecosystem that can manufacture things on a weekend as anywhere else in the world. That is still the best ecosystem. One trend of the trade shows, I was speaking at a trade show there, and then one thing that was common is that, maybe you see on the slides where the company says that they do, but when you go to the trade booth, they are doing something different. They just came up with a product last week, and they can implement that product, and they can start selling. No, we just pivot. We pivot between last week and now we're doing something different. US companies can't do that.
So you're talking about the product iteration is actually faster than the PPT iteration.
No question. No question. They can actually come up with a product on a week and say, this is what we're going to launch in a trade show by the end of this week. US companies can't do that. It may not work perfectly, but between building something that doesn't work perfectly and not being able to build at all, I take the first option any day.
Yeah, and also from my perspective, I think there are a couple ways to easily understand what's happening in the US, what's happening in China, right? One is that China is definitely the leader in terms of hardware iteration at the moment, right? For very simple reasons, supply chain is largely out of there. The components, the motors, right? The suppliers, most of them are centered around a very small region. Part of it is in the Shenzhen and Greater Shenzhen area, and part of it is in the Greater Shanghai
They call it
area.
the Greater Bay Area there. They have a name, the Greater Bay
Yes,
Area there.
in China, there's a China version of the Bay Area, which is around the Shenzhen, Hong Kong, that kind of triangle. So manufacturing is happening at much faster pace, and product iteration, like Alex mentioned, is actually happening at a speed not only in real time but also faster than presentations, which is so hard to think about if you actually think about the amount of work it takes for hardware iteration. So that's why for the past a year or 2 years, we see most of the robot hardware products are Chinese companies, right?
Manufacturing though. So there's
Manufacturers.
a main difference here, which is important for us to realize.
Right.
There's a main difference between China and the United States when it comes down to build a business and launch a product. Here, you can raise money on a PowerPoint. You have these beautiful presentations. You can speak super well. You go in front of a bunch of people, and you actually can raise money. In China, the presentations are awful. The PowerPoints are gigantic. There's so many words in those things, and they read every single word of them. But all of them have a product, and all of them are selling. So the problem with the United States is because people keep funding people on a demo on a PowerPoint, which is a problem. Now, that attracts companies who are building in China to come to the US to raise money here, because it's still much easier to raise money in the US. So although manufacturers happening there, companies still raising money here, and the innovation is still happening here. They just get produced a little fast in China. That's my perspective that I've seen.
Yeah, definitely agree. In terms of funding, it's much easier, faster to fundraise in the Silicon Valley.
Large amounts too.
Yes, much larger amount. Valuations are much higher, right? In terms of the model, right, the brains for the robots, there has been. I think it's kind of like a lot of people think the models currently developed in Silicon Valley is much more advanced than the models coming out of China. Do you think it will stay in this case for the short-term future, let's say like 2 to 3 years time horizon? Or do you think there will be some disruption, or the game is not gonna settle that China is a number 2 in terms of model development?
Actually, I don't see any change in the near future. Companies still keep innovating here and still make it in China, because as long as the money is here, and it's companies still get funded here, and still China still leads the manufacturing side, which is really, there's no competition in the entire planet right now. Nothing will change. Now, what would change is US actually can manufacture stuff at low scale, which is that we're trying to do at Circuit Launch, manufacturing, few thousand pieces. You cannot win this game in a large manufacturer with China, though. But the thing about automation and robotics is that manufacturing requires two very important things. You need skilled labor, and you need low cost skilled labor. So we don't have that in US. So we have to do
And these two problems can be solved by robotics
right
in the end.
which is the solution for the United States.
Right.
However, for automation robotics, you need two things. You need a skilled labor and low cost skilled labor, which US does not have. So what's the solution for this? We're gonna buy a bunch of stuff from China.
Right.
It's
So
still in the
we
near
need
future.
we need the solution to solve the problem. And in order to solve the problem, we need to import the goods from China first.
What we should have done, dive into a little politics here. What we should have done is we should have doing exactly what China did to the US and with a lot of countries. They spent years learning from us. They imported stuff from here. They took it to China. They learned and they built their own. We should be doing the same thing. Learn with Chinese, learn what they do because they're doing something very well. Learn with them, buy the machines, bring it here, automate it. I mean, that's really not a mystery to do this. Reverse engineer, exactly what they did.
On the model side, right? So I think one of the counter argument to what you just mentioned is really like, hey, when ChatGPT first come out, we feel like, hey, we have the best model in the world, and then DeepSeek has proved that, hey, China become the number one in terms of open source model in the AI space, right? And for such a long time, we feel like, hey, US are still the leader in terms of like multimodality, in terms of image generation, video generation, and then CDANs come out and take the crown in multimodality side of the capabilities. Why you think US will remain the leadership in terms of robotics model development, maybe in the VLA, VLM kind of context, maybe in the world model kind of context? Why do you think those kind of leadership will remain, at least in the near future?
There's a lot of ifs there. There's a lot of hypotheses here. One hypothesis is like, does language models stay the way they are right now, which means they need data to be trained, what the amount of data they have right now. So that's one hypothesis. And then the hypothesis, when you look into those things between DeepSeek, CDance, and all those different, there's a lot of conversations that we have to compare apples to apples here, which is not a conversation we're going to have right now. So I think the world of open source, if we're smaller models, if we keep doing what we're doing right now, is smaller models. Large models will be owned by 3 or 4 companies, probably just 2 or 3. And those models, if we use the same technology that we use right now, we need a lot of data center, a lot of computing, if they stay as they are right now. And there's pretty much 3 companies in the world that does that right now. And then those companies have an advantage. And I think even China, with all the mighty power, will be able to compete with those in the large language models. They will be able to compete in open source, small, specific language models, because they can turn those out, every week if they want to.
What's your take on the the future of the intelligence side, word model versus VLA VLM? Because VLA VLM, on my side, I think it's very data driven brute force. You need a lot of data in order to train for a particular use case, train for a particular skill that enable a robot to do certain things, right? So it feels that it's very limiting, where there are obviously a lot of more promises from the world foundation models, but the path seems to be much longer and clearer as well.
If we keep using language models as they are right now, the amount of data to train those, it is an infinite amount. So and when it comes down to robotics, for example, like when I go shake your hand, right? And then my body automatically knows the distance between you and I, exactly the force that I have to apply. It took years for us to learn exactly those things. So robotics don't have that data to be trained on language models right now. So we don't have. So the race for us right now is to who can collect that data the fastest and use the language models that we have right now to train that data. So then China has an advantage of that, because I've seen a lot of data centers over there doing that, because I don't know if you guys know how to work this, but like companies are buying this data at about $250 an hour. So for each 3 hours of video collection, you can only use about 1. So if you do this in China, paying someone $8, $10 an hour, you can make the math there. If you do this in the US, plus in electricity and all that kind of stuff, then
It is very, very labor intensive.
right.
Very labor
Yeah.
intensive.
Plus, you need all the machines to train these things too. Like in China, I've seen like 30,000, 40,000 square feet warehouses just with like 100, 150 robots and about 200 teenager Chinese people just going every single minute, just doing this, open the door,
Yeah, it's
doing this.
data collection
Yeah.
factories, mega factories for data collection that is very labor intensive, right? These people, they just wear the VR headset and using motion controllers to do the teleoperation, control the robots to collect the data.
Have you seen the ads, the marketing ads for factories in China? So they have
I
like
didn't see the ads.
so they have ads right now. If you like have a factory with a lot of people, say the ads is something like this: like I have 5,000 employees working on this device all day long. I can add a sensor to them, record everything that they do, and I'll sell you that data. If you need that data, contact me. Here's the number, the WeChat.
Very practical, at least. So, we talk about US, we talk about China. What's happening for the rest of the world? What's happening in Asia? What did you see in Europe and, Latin America, Middle East?
So you have to divide the world in North America and China right now. All the other countries are kind of feeding off of those ecosystems one way or another. So either people come here for money or they're going to China to manufacture the stuff. And that's true with the entire world right now. So there's things happens in Europe, sure, but where do they get the money? In US. There's things happening in South America, sure, but where are they coming to get the money? In the US. And where are they making them? In China.
So I think that's a very good point, which lead to the next question, right? We're living a so fragmented world. So U.S. and China just had a recent handshake with the two
Sure.
presidents. Hopefully things will ease up a little bit, but we cannot always have wishful thinking when we are planning towards the future. So as founders and entrepreneurs in the robotics space today, what are some of the best practices on how they can leverage the resource from both sides of the world to maximize their potential?
I can tell you what I've seen in the companies with the circuit launch ecosystem. So companies are starting out here. They set up the company in US. They raise a bit of money. Then they move the entire team to China. Spend 2, 3 months over there building the robot. Build the robot. Bring it back to the United States. Now they go back to raise more money. Now they raise more money. Then they go back to China. Keep building the product over there until they get because they can do fast. Like you just can't do that fast in the United States. If you are maybe 1X robotics and you raise if you're 1X or if you're a figure and you raise $100 million, $200 billion, that's a different story. But for the startups we're talking about, why don't you do this? They look at like, what's the best cost-effective way for me to do this? Raise money in the US, go to factory, go to China for a few months, build a product there, come back to the US, raise more money, keep doing this back and forth.
Or to make it simple, you can just buy the Chinese product and build applications on top.
Yeah, but then you don't raise money doing that. It's all about the money.
Yeah, that's true.
Like you have to be able to you have to be able to claim some IP, and if you're buying Chinese products, you're not really claiming IP. Plus, you lose the edge of saying that it was developed in America.
Right. Yeah. Ideally, you build factories here, and then you can source some of the components from China, and you do the final assembly here as well, and also you can retain your critical IPs domestically as
Or
well.
Mexico, which is one part that we haven't talked about, which is like out of these ecosystems, what the one that actually has the best advantage right now out of those two, Mexico. There's a lot of trade being happening between Texas and Mexico right now, especially around the Monterrey region. There's a lot of Chinese companies that are giving a shot and actually establishing companies and manufacturing that area with the hope that if something blows up between US and China, that they will be safe by still selling products through Mexico.
Definitely. Have anyone seen the recent new product from Unitree called a GD01? Anyone? It's okay. So if you haven't seen, I recommend you look it up. It's a crazy humanoid robot that is like a 2-floor type of high, and the human pilot personally sitting inside like a cockpit inside the
You
robot.
remember the first
Right.
RoboCop version of those big ones that I showed you, and then in the
I feel
meeting
like
room.
we are entering into like the first step with that robot of like the Pacific Rim, right, where like human pilot is like piloting giant robots. Yeah,
Fire range is
I think
awesome.
that's like one of the crazy ways how like the development of robotic form factor is taking us one step closer to what we imagined through all these sci-fis, right? Alex, it's not cheap, but it's not too
So
expensive.
it's lower, 750, like when I saw and it just came out. So
It's
$100,000 chip
yeah,
is on sale right now if you want to buy one.
So if you can afford like a supercar, you can totally afford that, right? And it's definitely much more eye catchy than a supercar. So.
Walking to the bar. That'd be
So,
awesome.
Alex, question for you. Out of all the form factor, different robot form factor you have seen today, what do you think is a form factor that totally make a lot of sense but haven't exist yet?
I don't know what exists yet because that doesn't is irrelevant because humans will never be able to do the job that way. So we have to worry about the transition right now. Like, there's a lot of this question: why does it have to look like a human? Well, because we have a lot of tools in the world that humans operate. So as a transition, probably the most effective way to do this is build humanoids that can use the current tools that we have. And then that comes to the next question, which is like the next phase to this is machines inventing tools for them to use. Humans can no longer participate in that game. So it's hard to know exactly because the machine needs to go through this training process right now, using other tools and say this, irrelevant. You don't need to do that anymore. Now here's a whole set of tools that you cannot use it just for us to use.
Right. Yeah. You know, when I first look into it, right, I always hear these kind of questions like why humanoid, right? Why are we making the robot has to be kind of look like human? Can we just install like 6 different arms or like, change the head to like some other positions or merge the head with the body, something like that. But I, as I look into like deeper into the industry, especially on the data availability side, and also a lot of the intelligence are trained through this egocentric or human-centric data, and also we will need the robotics to be able to fit in the human infrastructure, right? Where it's primarily serving our human beings. It's more practical way to go for a lot of cases as humanoid.
Just take a look what happened with the free manufacture for Tesla. So when if Elon Musk had his own way, he would never had any employees. It would be everything automated. He would have no problem replacing everybody in the factory for a robot. So he actually attempted something like that at the beginning, where he automated as much as possible. It was so much automation that created a problem because when they need to innovate or they need to add some things to the factory, for example, the whole automation process takes too long. So they have to hire a bunch of humans. They saw that at COVID. So and then they stopped. They have to start to hire a bunch of humans again to actually do that work because humans are very adaptable, and that's why the humanoid it's so important. And that's why you haven't heard him saying about any cars within the last 6 months. He reconfigured part of the free manufacturer to build humanoids. I wouldn't be surprised if Tesla become just a manufacturer for humanoids only, or if they're figured out a way like Hyundai is doing with Boston Dynamics to use all those robots to manufacture their own things, and then not have to use a human at all. But at the end goal here is not to have a human doing the work, because if a human does the work, this doesn't go anywhere. Like they're never going to be able to make money. It's not efficient. We cannot compete. It's just pointless. We have lost this war already. As far as the robotics, it's just like a time now line where they're going to be able to do everything we can exponentially better. We have lost this already. We're just waiting. Now we're just sitting on the sidelines waiting until they get good enough that we can't really compete anymore.
Definitely, definitely. What's your one bold prediction about the future? No?
one feature.
Yeah,
But
about
like,
the future of robotics.
um, well, they will replace everything we do, and I think that's inevitable. And
I agree. That's not bold enough.
yeah,
Oh,
question is like how long that's going to take, and then what the future looks after that. I do think that we're going to use the same humanoids for human intimacies. So meaning that we're going to have a lot of relationships with these robots within the next 10 years. I have
robot
no doubt.
boyfriend, girlfriend.
Not humans robot relationships.
Okay.
If you don't believe me, go visit Japan. Anybody has been to Japan? So if you've been to Japan, you find these places where you pay just to talk to people, just to talk to women. It's a very lonely place, and that you have a glimpse of what it means, a country that has a lot of older people that are lonely. And then we have now a growing number of people who are lonely, and I don't think that change anytime soon. Evolution favors not the strongest, not the smartest, favors those who can adapt. And as people much smarter than me have said, extinction is the rule, not the exception. So we have to adapt, and dealing with another human is not the path of least resistance for this. I think humans will find it much easier to relate with a robot than with another human, especially in a world that we don't care about having kids as much as our parents did.
I think it is a bold prediction, and I do think, like it or not, it's the version of the future we're kind of heading towards. And I actually agree with you on this one.
All right, so we're
Yeah.
in agreement. Let's
Okay.
go buy some robotos.
Nice, great. We have
Kidding.
questions. We have time for maybe a few questions. I see one hand over there.
South America or even the Middle East. If there were peace in the Middle East, that would be a great place because there's a lot of unemployed people and the average wage is below $500 a month. So it would be very competitive with China. And they're proven to be bright and entrepreneurial and hustle because, if you look at what they've been doing in these wars, it takes a lot of hustle and entrepreneurialism, and they've created a lot. And I mean, it's devastating, terrible, but the labor cost is the right price there.
So I think it's important to notice that China actually does not have cheapest labor as they had before. And then if you compare to Mexico, Mexico probably have cheaper labor than China right now. I'm Brazilian, so I grew up in Brazil, and then there's much cheap labor over there. However, the bureaucracy for you to get people hired over there is absurd. It does not offset the costs of the cheap labor. So in order for you to go set up a company over there and do all those things, it's end up to be more expensive at the end of the day. Another thing you have to realize is this: for the data collection side, which is maybe it's one of the party you're referring to, US are not going to buy Chinese data, and then they're not going to buy Brazilian data. They're going to buy data that's collected in the United States. China is going to do the same thing. So there's all this politics right now where you need to buy the local data. You cannot import the data. Even knowing that humans are human anywhere, you could collect the gestures pretty much anywhere in the world, but companies still that's a AGI bot. So I was at the launch of the AGI bot robot right now, and then they have a whole platform for collection. They believe that the data collection is a $5 trillion business right now, bigger than the humanoid market. So they said, I was like, well, let me set up a place for you in Brazil and collect all the data for you. They're like, we can't do that because if we collect the data in Brazil, we can only sell to Brazil, maybe to China. In the US, we have to collect the data in the US to US companies. There's all this.
You think China has a slight advantage because it's a dictatorship? They could get things done. You don't have this democracy and all these, interests and legal controls. And
I do, but I think the most important, I think the advantage that I don't know if it's an advantage yet, but there's one thing that the world should be watching out with China right now. It's just as we walk into what I call a post-labor economy in a world where your labor has no value. In China went full force into this because before, because labor was cheap, they didn't automate as much, and now everywhere in China is automated. You go to factory, has 40 people, now has 2 people working on it, and then this is run by 2 rural couples that they came from outside of Shenzhen or Guangdong areas, anywhere. So China said, it's not about the labor anymore. It's about technology. We need to be able to compete in technology because they don't have those political fights. They will have to deal with the unemployment of the result of that automation. And because they don't have those political fights, the lessons that they're gonna whatever they're gonna do to sustain that should be perhaps a lesson for the rest of the world. Because they don't have those politics.
Yeah, lesser frictions overall.
Right.
That's for sure.
All right, and
Got
we
this
are
one more
almost
question there?
wrapped. So
Yeah.
okay, keep it quick.
I don't have a question particularly on robotics, but Ryan, your firm Solaris is very, very active in the secondaries market. I would love to hear your insights on the recent statements from companies like OpenAI and Anthropic of what they're saying about SPVs and where you see things going.
Interesting area.
Yeah, I think there's no clarity on where things going. That's a short answer, right? Obviously, we are saying like the secondary market has never been as active as what we see today, right? And I think there's nothing that could stop more and more private capitals wanting to get into all these tech deals, right? And wanting to have direct access. And we all know that the three biggest IPOs this year is going to be OpenAI, Anthropic, and SpaceX. Probably going to suck up all the liquidity in the public market, and everyone has very, very high expectation, capture the top of the spotlight everywhere, right? So I think this will going on for a while, at least for the foreseeable future in the next 6 to 12 months. Further than that, like I think it goes into a bigger question on like how long the music will last, right? Will there will be a bubble burst, or will new value get created at a speed that's so fast that all these accelerations can all be justified at the end of the day? So I think that's an open question for us all.